I'd like to welcome you to the third of our keynote lectures. You may have noted that actually all three of these keynotes related to AI. The first day we heard about AI in the context of statistical production dissemination. Yesterday we heard about AI as a tool for economic researchers. Well, today it's about AI as an economic phenomenon and the question to which extent this is reflected in our macroeconomic statistics. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Carol Corrado, who is a senior policy scholar at the Center for Business and Public Policy at Georgetown University. I've actually known Carol for some time. I think our paths first crossed when you were still at the Federal Reserve, already a leading voice and scholar on measurement issues around information communication technology and productivity at the time. I think, however, that many people know you in particular due to your work on intangibles. I mean, that started already 20 years ago, and you wrote some seminal papers that spawned a whole flow of literature on intangibles. And indeed, during this conference, we have again been witnessing to a number of really interesting papers on that matter. So it's only natural that you would have been one of the first to look at AI as well in this context and ask the hard questions. What does the emergence of AI mean for our macroeconomic statistics? So we'll hear from you on national accounts in the age of AI, production and consumption measurements at a crossroad. And without further delay, welcome again, Carol, and over to you, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, Paul, for that warm introduction. It really is a pleasure to be here and talk about a really interesting subject. Just exactly what am I going to be talking about? Is this hooked up? It's I mean, I was pressing it. Why didn't it? Yep, there we go. Okay, let me begin with a quick map of where we're going in this presentation. This talk has three parts. The first is framing what AI actually is in an economic sense and whether the new system of accounts addresses its measurement. Second, the topic that will be the bulk of this presentation, which is the measurement of production, including prices. And third, which I'll get to at the end, is the consumption side and whether the dramatic price declines that I'm going to show you in AI output are actually reaching consumers and what that means for welfare measurement and GDPB. So let me start with the framing. I want to ground the measurement discussion in what AI actually is and how it has changed. And this diagram, which I'll show to you in parts, is the clearest way I know how to make the point. The first era of AI is handcrafted AI. Think of Deep Blue, the IBM supercomputer that beat Garry Kasparov at chess in nearly 30 years ago. May of 1997. Every evaluation rule was hand-coded by chess experts and engineers. The intelligence was explicitly engineered. The resulting code, what was called Deep Blue, it was really a computer, was capital in the conventional sense. Somebody invested time and resources to build it. It generated services over time, and this is something we know how to treat in the national accounts. Now, contrast Deep Blue with AlphaZero. DeepMind system that in 2017 learned chess from scratch by playing millions of games against itself. It discovered strategies. Oh, just to be clear, no human chess knowledge was encoded, no evaluation rules were encoded, but it discovered strategies that had never appeared in 400 years of chess theory. It's also called, actually really is called chess theory. Same game, same rules, but the intelligence was learned, not engineered. And that shift from hand coding to learning from data is the machine learning revolution, and it sort of represents, if you will, a technology shock to the production of software, certainly a major transformation. So instead of programmers writing decision logic, you have a training process that extracts statistical patterns from vast data sets, and the human element shifts from coding to data curation, to architecture design, and evaluation. There are still humans involved, yes. And the capital stock that results is trained model weights. It has no obvious predecessor in the SNA. And the third stage is where we are now. Foundation models and generative AI. They don't just automate specific tasks, they automate the process of building AI systems themselves. Fine-tuning, prompt engineering, agentic workflows, these are all ways of using AI to produce more AI capability. So this diagram closes the loop completely. AI output becomes the primary input to further AI production. And this is what makes the measurement challenge so acute. We are no longer just dealing with a new type of capital asset. We are dealing with a technology that is reorganizing the production process for knowledge itself. This is where the intangible connection comes. The SNA was not designed for this, and the question is whether the SNA 2025 at least sort of takes us a few steps towards getting there. So does it? Well, it does partially, but not for the really hard cases. There are three distinct sources of AI mismeasurement, and I'm just going to be hammering away at these in my presentations. So I hopeful by the end you'll be convinced. The first is the cloud asset boundary. Cloud expenditures are treated as intermediate consumption even when they are functionally equivalent to capital services. The second is price index gaps. There are no official indexes that I know of that try to capture a capability adjusted price index for AI software or services. And the third is, for lack of a better phrase, investment concentration. AI spending is heavily concentrated in a small number of frontier firms. So aggregate statistics reflect producers, not the broad-based diffusion that matters for productivity. SNA 2025 makes genuine progress on source one for specific cases. It recognizes cloud services, that some cloud services are capacity building, and suggests that they should be capitalized. It also strengthens the guidance on data assets and own account software, and that's real progress. But sources 2 and 3 are essentially untouched. There's no methodology for capability-adjusted AI price indices. There is no treatment for agentic AI or foundation models as distinct asset classes. And the ownership test, the rule that determines whether something belongs on a sector's balance sheet or not, still excludes most cloud AI from the accounts of the firms that use it. the cases that matter most for measuring AI's macroeconomic impact, in other words, remain unsolved. And this is the gap that I'm trying to address here. So first topic, production and capital. My remarks are going to be based on some joint work that I've done with my intangible co-authors, Jonathan Haskell's in the audience here. And if we begin here, what do we mean is software eating the world? Well, Mark Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world. We ask in our work, is that measurable? And is the National Accounts Framework set up to see it? And the answer is that the signals and the basic framework are there, but the measurement is not. And that is the gap that matters for policy. So, the visible signals of AI's impact, this was the P&P paper that was referenced on the previous slide. Software capital, in the United States, software capital explains about 40% of US labor productivity growth since 2017. And the software producing sector, that is just 6% of US non-farm business economy, contributed about half of the notable acceleration in TFP in the US. So something real is happening. And again, so this column here sort of says, sometimes this red works and sometimes it's there. This is what we do in the Eating the World paper. And I'm going to review, since some of these are rather technical topics, but I'm going to just review them in general terms. I'm not going to talk about what I think is something very innovative that we did, but just in the interest of time, it's not fully developed in any event. So maybe we'll have a separate paper on that sometime. So how do we go about solving these three problems? Well, we advocate, and I think this is very important, a two-sector framework for thinking about these issues. This framework has the two sectors. There's an upstream sector that produces AI capital, software, trained models, data sets, data assets. It conducts software R&D. And crucially, as I mentioned before, it uses AI in its own production, creating a recursive loop like a flywheel. Every turn of the wheel lowers the cost of the next turn. This leads to superior TFP in the upstream in this sector, and that drives the price of its output down in relative terms. There's a downstream sector that's the using sector. It uses AI capital as an input alongside labor and other factors. As the price of software falls, the rental price falls, and we get substitution between AI capital and other factors. But crucially, firms cannot simply swap AI capital for some other input. Organizational capital, Z, must co-evolve with AI adoption. So why two sectors? There's really two conceptually different types of substitution going on. And they both show up in the aggregate factor share. So first we have this downstream diffusion channel where AI replaces or augments labor in downstream production. And then second, there's this recursive upstream sort of channel that I previously discussed. So these have very different determinants, and which is why the two two sectors matter. This just, to fix ideas, this diagram just sort of shows what I've just sort of talked about conceptually. As seen in these mechanisms, users of national accounts can focus on two observable diagnostics to follow the diffusion and progress of AI. That's the good news. What are they? The downstream AI capital factor share and the rate of decline in AI capital costs. The latter reflecting the progress in the upstream sector. The faster it falls, the faster the upstream TFP is, i.e. the faster AI is leaping ahead. The downstream diffusion channel, I mean, that's where we want to see industries disrupted by AI. I probably shouldn't have put it that way, but that's where we want to see AI being used, and we can follow the progress by looking at the AI capital factor share. So this is all conceptually consistent with the national accounts framework. But of course, as I've mentioned, they're both mismeasured. And but before I get to that, I want to introduce a theoretical caution or a conceptual caution. And let me just go back, see if this red pointer works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But see here, I've been talking about upstream TFP, falling prices, induces substitution, but there's another margin that is sort of mediated by this need for investment to reorganize production processes to the extent that that's where the gains come from. And notice I've mentioned task composition here. If any of you have gone to conferences where there's a lot of research on AI being conducted, you will see very interesting papers that, for lack of a better word, I'll just call case studies. They'll show you, they've gotten some data, maybe proprietary data from some companies, and they show how the adoption of AI has transformed the way, for instance, customer relations management is handled. There's studies that show how R&D labs are adopting AI and becoming more efficient in the sense of costs. And on and on and on. I think at the AEA meetings, American Economic Association annual meetings, like 2 years ago, there was, I think I counted up some 30 papers. Now it's a vast meeting, but still, 30, covering all fields of economics. But there were 30 such case studies, and every one of them talked about tasks. And the task framework has also been used to make estimates of what the impact of AI adoption is going to be in terms of productivity. And you might say, in a room of national accountants and productivity scholars, gee, that's sort of not very familiar to me. And don't we have a way of computing productivity? I mean, Paul wrote the manual on it, right? It is a different framework. I could give a whole talk on how it relates to national accounts, but in its own way, it's very congruent. It's just building things up a different way. And I think what we argue in this paper is that as interesting and revealing as the task framework is, it gets to a point where it says, even if in these individual little tasks throughout the economy, there's a perfect substitution of AI capital for labor, that output is still bounded by the degree to which one task substitutes for another. There's really like two layers of substitution going on there. sometimes it's not clear in that literature, but a recent paper by Jones and Tonetti really hammers that home. How does that relate to what we're doing? We argue that it's functionally related to RZ, our organizational capital, the need for a co-evolvement of organizational capital along with investments in AI. And there's a way to, and another way of looking at it is to take a sort of page or take a cue from Milgram and Roberts' 1990 when they talked about the structure of production and manufacturing, and suggest that, well, what they said was when you write down Y equals a function of K and L, it's not wrong, but what's missing, what you don't see, is how K and L are coordinated. And it's a very elegant argument that they make. And so we link Z, as it were, Z, to this task framework by saying, well, you couldn't think of coordination of production as almost a meta task. That somewhere, you're going to need to introduce like new coordination methods to really get a bang out of this technology shock. And I think Amazon's logistics revolution is a good example of how new coordination methods ultimately become a driver of not substitution in this classic neoclassical sense, where you're just moving along a given production function, but it's a driver of TFP itself. So anyway, what we're saying is that a high elasticity of substitution and falling user costs are necessary, but they're not a sufficient condition for diffusion and broad-based productivity gains. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go to the three measurement problems and how they're biasing our ability to see things in the national accounts. The AI production stack, or an illustration of the AI production stack, is shown on this chart. And to understand the measurement problems, we need to understand the AI supply chain. This stack is drawn with revenue in mind, with an estimate of where we are today and industry projections or an estimate in 2035 taken from industry projections. Let me just sort of go through this really quickly. The table organizes the AI value chain into 5 layers. Applications are at the top. This would be ChatGPT, Copilot, Harvey, that are roughly $19 billion annually, and $19 billion globally today. 19. Note that it's projected to be 650 in, well, really 9 years from today. So the second layer are the foundation models and the APIs. The foundation model APIs. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, these are 20 billion today. Platforms and tooling, this is where the enterprise data infrastructure sits. These are revenue estimates, so it's not the value of data, but this is just the revenue that people in this industry gain by selling tools to enterprises to manage vector databases and what have you. And then we get to the hyperscalers. The hyperscale cloud AI, the fourth layer, is the biggest today and projected to be the biggest 9 years from today. This is not total cloud services. This is a very small part of total cloud services annually. This is just the AI increment in the cloud services. So this is taken by building up from companies that are in this business. So the total software and services market, the total stack of software and services is $72 billion today. Then the compute sits right below it, and that's actually the largest layer today. So two things to take from this. Well, really three, but two main ones. The first is the sheer scale of what is coming, and how it underscores the urgency of getting the measurement right. Second is the L4 cloud revenue is precisely where the asset boundary problem is most acute, and look at where it's going. And then I'll just sort of, not to sort of confuse the thread here, but when I get to prices, I'm going to go into this stack at L2 and try to get the API prices. And I'll argue that that's really telling you about the whole stack. But anyway, so the cloud asset boundary, you can forget about the formal stuff on the slide. I'm addressing an audience of, let's say, national accountants. I'm not saying, what I'm going to tell you is that there's like, the asset boundary problem is one that creates mirror image and offsetting errors. The problem is not that in aggregate GDP you don't have capital factor income correctly. You do, but it's just you need, well, conceptually, Eric's shaking his head. Conceptually, it's again, we need the two-sector framework to look at diffusion, which is what we're ultimately really interested in. And there, you are not going to have the capital services attributed to the downstream industries, and so you will not be able to observe really the primary diagnostic that you need in national accounts to follow the diffusion of AI or to permit people to estimate elasticities of substitution. And I'll get to a recommendation about what to do about it. But so it's not that aggregate capital income is necessarily wrong, but it's sort of wrong. It's sort of right for the wrong reasons, I would say. And of course, it goes against the grain in the SNA to have two sets of principles for one given item. I mean, and what I'm really saying is one size does not fit all. In the upstream sector, once you consolidate all of the producers, you're going to get their use correct if you've taken out what the downstream has already used. So there you don't really make any change. But if you allocated what's used in the downstream sector to the downstream sector, upstream is going to be fine. So it's like it's not a one-size-fits all proposition so easily, which is why I'm going to recommend a satellite account, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So maybe to make this more concrete, I want to show it's sort of an observable digital capital income share this is for the US, for the whole non-farm economy. That's what's in panel 1. And it is built asset by asset. That's what the 3 components are. And then if we go to panel 2, top line's the same, only the disaggregation is software producers versus the rest of the economy. And the rest of the economy line, I know, looks eerily like the sum of ICT and existing software, but that's just an accident. So panel 2 is, And it sort of would say the following, that there's a total capital income share that's rising gently, and that it then accelerates sharply in 2017. And you can see in panel 1 that that's driven a lot by software R&D, presumably reflecting the massive costs of developing the foundation models that we're now all familiar with. But in panel 2, where it's split by some rough categorization of sectors, you can see that the traditional industries, the dotted line, it looks like nothing's happening. And Mark Andreessen's famous 2011 prophecy really about software eating the world, really what he said was he was arguing that software-driven companies like Amazon and Google would disrupt and dominate traditional industries. And it doesn't look like that's happening here. So panel 3 adds an AI cloud adjustment that I ginned up for the purposes of making a chart. It's not based upon official statistics. It was just calculated for this presentation. And as you can see, when you add a credible but conservative estimate of, this is just AI services in there, that the gap narrows considerably. And it suggests that, oh, something's starting to happen downstream. So bottom line, the concentration is real. That's what we see in panel 2. And diffusion is further advanced than official data show, and that's panel 3. So that's to motivate the two of the sources that I talked about. So now on to the third. Measuring AI capital prices. The IT era priced hardware and software separately. And this was captured in the era's oft-mentioned adage, what Intel giveth, Microsoft taketh away. And I can still hear Bob Gordon echoing that at a CRIW conference on high-tech price measures way back when. But the separation was genuine. A chip index could be built independently of the software running on it. But AI breaks this separability. Think about the stack. Capability gains emerge from the interaction of all stack layers: architecture, data, training scale. No single layer can be priced independently, and improvements are often highly discontinuous, architectural breakthroughs rather than smooth progress along a fixed attribute space. Hedonic methods fail because they need measurable characteristics and stable measurable characteristics. So the right unit of measurement, it's the deployed model rather than any individual input. And we're going to look at the cost per unit of productive AI output regardless of which stack layer generated the gain. And so we need a new adage, a new slogan, using the same verb tense, what the frontier model delivereth. And that's the approach that I'm going to take, and it's usable for both capital services and stocks under certain conditions. So so the next, there's some details here about the construction of the index. I don't have many data points, but the point is that I get token prices for each model that's been launched over the past 3 years. I run a weighted regression and I'm just estimating the trend over the 3 years. It's not like a price index in a year by year by year. Ideally, I would have data and fit a model like the one that Anna talked about in the first session on Tuesday, a time product dummy approach, but we're not there yet. So this exercise is viewed as a proof of concept of the AI stack approach. So I build 2 price indexes. One is a token price index, the raw cost, and I find that on average that falls nearly 25% per year. And then second, I build a capability adjusted index using an industry performance metric, what's called the EPIC Capability Index. And this is a metric that was developed by Google researchers, and it's maintained and extended by EPIC, which is a nonprofit foundation. It incorporates reasoning, coding, and knowledge benchmarks using item response theory. I read the paper that detailed the theory of constructing it, and it was pretty hard going. But the whole idea of doing it and why they went out is they knew they could never do anything like hedonics, and they needed an approach for something that lasts as sort of the frontier for a couple months, maybe. And so they use the available benchmarks that the industry has developed and combine them using a high-power statistical approach. Anyway, this index falls 38.5% per year over these 3 years based upon, what do I say, 20-some observations. I would expect it would change as new observations are added, but it's really easy to update. But anyway, there's this interesting gap, I believe, this 14 percentage point per year gap, that is the quality adjustment gap, which note is not as large as the drop in the pure prices themselves, because we're at a stage where in the industry where there's a lot of competition and a lot of learning and about production methods, and again, it's this flywheel effect that every turn of the wheel, as you get the new versions of these various foundation models, it lowers the cost. And lo and behold, that cost over these 3 years fell 25% per year. So AI model prices fall because the unit prices fall, reflecting the production costs and the competition, and also because the models deliver more services per unit consumed. So that is the result. Sorry, I should have advanced the slide a little earlier. Those are the observations. It's plotting every observation that I have, both token prices and the capability adjusted prices. The DeepSeek observation is not used. Anyway, it's very easy to document with 23 observations. So now let's put this in context. I've shown you the production stack. I've shown you a rough estimate of how much AI cloud services can change the trajectory of to diffusion, and it makes a big difference. Now I've estimated a price index, falls whopping fast. And let's put this into the full software market and start thinking about a measurement agenda. So this table here, which I'm not showing, I'm just showing percent of the total. This is the total software market as estimated by industry sources. And the AI stack software, the L1 through L4 value is 6% of the total market now. But all told, the next two items are also AI. They're just a slightly different nature. So AI pricing uplift refers to, well, and the agentic AI refers to AI features and agent and agentic tiers in legacy enterprise platforms. This is a big deal, actually. So Salesforce, the AI agent in Salesforce is in this agentic AI tier. Microsoft Copilot is in the AI pricing uplift. And so where do these numbers come from? They come from the actual extra charge that customers pay to get that extra tier. Otherwise, the base price is included in legacy and also traditional ML, machine learning stuff that's around. There isn't much of that, is also in legacy. So this market, so AI segments are 17% of the market today. But gosh, in 2035, it's 100%. And that's not by construction. I mean, I didn't say, oh, in 10 years, I want legacy to be zero. I took a total market forecast from Gartner and then broke it out my way using some information from Synergy and a couple other sources. And then the legacy was backed out by subtraction. And it just happened to be zero by 9 years from today. So, all told, I would say if we don't treat the measurement challenge as urgent, if we allow the cloud asset boundary, the lack of AI price indexes, and the failure to adjust our diagnostics for industry concentration, if we allow that to compound for another decade, AI will be dominating the market and nobody's going to be looking at the national accounts because they won't know where to look. They won't know what they should be looking, we could teach them what they should be looking for, but they're not going to see AI. Has to be put in there. So the window to act is narrow, and that's what the rest of what I'm going to say, just to underscore that. So let's go to, I'm going to skip these estimates of the multi-input substitution elasticities. We don't really prove one of the points that I think we prove that Jones and Tonetti are right in a nutshell, that there's weak substitution. That's consistent with their weak links argument. We don't prove that in what we've done so far that Z is playing the role that our estimates of organizational capital are playing the role that theoretically we would like them to. And so that's what we're still working on. So at this point, this is somewhat repeating myself, but I think I really want to drive it home. There's 4 priorities. The highest near-term payoff is to developing estimates by industry of cloud services by type of use. And I would say what we need is the AI segment, the compute segment, and then the legacy software, the SaaS segment. And if every country had that, no matter what they chose to capitalize in GDP, productivity economists could pick it up and compute that capital factor share, the AI capital factor share, and see what's, or they could do lots of things with those data. And that's what I think national accounts really, that's a priority. Is just display what we know about who's using what. We need a capability adjusted price index. And I'll get to the consumer in a minute. The frontier, the leading edge of the agenda would be a capability adjusted index for agentic AI. I haven't touched that. There are emerging benchmarks, but there is not a consensus on the unit of output. And industry people, so I understand, are working on it. But is it a task, is it conversation, or is it outcome? All of that has to be defined before, a method, until benchmarks and then a methodology for combining them can be developed. And this is, of course, the leading edge of AI. In 10 years, that's what, after this 10 years of foundation models, then we're going to be all agentic, and we've got to get ready for that. So those are my lessons. So consumption. If I can find my notes. So I want to turn to the consumption side and talk, and this will be short, and talk about the L1 layer in that stack. There's actually a growing consumer segment in there. Now it reflects a mix of businesses and consumers. So it has a fast-growing direct consumer segment, and so a natural question to ask is, can we tie the consumer AI price to what we know about the stack price up to the foundation model itself? And so I tried to do something here, just because there really is a question. It's not just what is a number, but we really want to know whether the price declines and the costs, which are cost-driven largely, the 2/3 of which is cost-driven, are these being passed on to consumers? I mean, that's like a really sort of relevant question. And if you follow the same logic as I explained with the API price, you have this conceptual chain, and there's this sort of element in it that that's different by the time we get to consumers, that reflects competition, margins, the other costs. By this, I don't know if people know what I mean here, but it's like there's people who don't have foundation models. They buy the tokens from the foundation models through an API, and that's the API price. And then they have their own application wrapped on top of that to serve particular business segments, let's say. And so there's other costs. So we shouldn't expect it to be exactly the same. So again, you have to define a standardized unit, which I did, and in a way that the subscriber counts cancel, which means that I can work with list prices, intensity, and utilization. It's a big deal, utilization. I don't need proprietary user subscriber information. I'd like to have it, but it's not something I could do for this presentation. And you follow the same logic using the EPIC index, and you do the weighted regression on the nominal price and the capability unit price, and you get the following. Let's turn up here to the comparison with the what's called the upstream output. That's what it is. So the main result, in other words, is up there on the left. So the nominal unit price is essentially flat, barely positive at 2.9% per year, and not statistically significant. And that's sort of consistent with what we observe. The major providers have held their subscription prices at $20 a month, more or less, since launch, even as the underlying models have improved. So then the capability adjusted index then tells a different story, that once you account for the quality change in those models, that are essentially what's driving the power of the service that's being purchased, the unit price falls at minus 13.5% per year, and that is significant at the 10% level. So these data are just noisier than the other data set that I have. And the gap between the two is a very large, nearly 18 percentage points per year. So the consumer side gap is larger than the producer side gap, number one, and number two, the unit price doesn't fall. So I think we have to say that consumers are definitely receiving rapidly improving AI services at flat nominal prices, but none of the production costs decline in the generation of the foundation models themselves is being passed on to consumers, but it could be offset by, of course, the cost of the app that's reaching the consumers. There's just other costs involved there, and that's sort of where things sort of end up. So, consumer prices and GDP very quickly. I want to close this section with a connection to earlier work that I think validates the GDPB approach of Eric Brynjolfsson and colleagues. In a paper that I wrote with Dave Byrne and published in 2021, the reference is on the slide, we constructed quality-adjusted price indexes for consumer digital services at the time. And we did this broadly. In other words, we covered free services as well as paid-for services. And what we found was striking was that the consumer surplus generated by the real services implied by our quality-adjusted prices closely matched the value obtained by Brynjolfsson and colleagues using a stated preference survey approach. So two completely different methodologies: revealed preference through price measurement and stated preference through surveys, converging on similar numbers. I always thought this was amazing, and Eric has always said that to me as well, but we've never sort of really done anything with it. But anyway, for those of you who are fans of GDPB, I would say that that's a meaningful validation of the price index approach to welfare measurement. And the capability adjusted consumer AI price I've shown just extends that logic directly to AI services. And the minus 13.5% per year implies rapid growth in consumer surplus that neither GDP nor the CPI currently captures. And I should add that Eric will be coming out with a survey on his stated preference results for consumer AI. Anyway, it's underway. I don't know when it'll be released. But anyway, putting two sides of this presentation together, the producer gap of minus 14% and the consumer gap of nearly 18%, both point in the same direction. National accounts are systematically understating the welfare contribution of AI. The bias is not small, it is not ambiguous in sign, and it is growing as AI becomes a larger share of economic activity. And that, my friends, is the measurement agenda.
Thank you very much, Carol. Let's move over here for the Q&A, maybe. So we have a few minutes to discuss. I will collect two or three questions.
Was I that much over?
No, that's fine. And we'll start with Richard, please.
Thank you. Excellent talk. Richard Hayes at the ONS. Two questions. You mentioned that you could apply your price indices to a satellite account. Is there a technical reason why you couldn't, if we had the right data, apply them into the main national accounts?
No, I just don't think national accountants would go for it.
Okay. So a second one, you were talking about capital services being classified essentially into intermediate consumption for downstream firms. If we traded capital services in a slightly different way, so we could capture them within the measure of downstream firms to keep the capital labor ratio essentially telling us the correct story for productivity analysis, is that a potential solution to part of your problem?
Yes. Because it's going to be growing faster than the existing capital services, even if you limit them to just digital capital. Once you get, you're going to capitalize databases. I mean, that will change, but it's not going to grow fast enough. It's just not going to reflect the use, which is primarily through the prices primarily through the AI revenue segment of cloud services and even the compute segment. I mean, there are people who make a lot of the decline in the share of ICT equipment. And they say, look, the prices are still falling, maybe not as fast as they once did. But, they're, again, weak substitution. I mean, the share is going down. But it's like you sit back and you say, I'm not so sure it is, because I want to know what the compute charge is for all those firms who don't have IT departments now and are buying their everything from a cloud provider. Then we could see, then we could see what's going on. And we just can't now, at least not accurately. I mean, I made an adjustment, but it was data-based, but it has a wide confidence interval.
We have two questions. There's one up there, and then Eric. So let's collect those two, and then we got please on the balcony.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Karen. Fascinating. Two quick points. The first one on the task-based framework, I see your point on the organizational meta task, but is this just not, is this just not a new task or a series of new tasks? We've always had managers. These would be different managers with probably different tasks. Can we just not put them in the main framework? And the second point is on the price, because I think it's interesting, very interesting data on the API access. But is this the price for the final consumer? Because I wouldn't say final consumer uses API. Final consumer would use the.
No, they pay the subscription price, and that was the consumer price. Yeah, but the businesses pay the token price. Yeah,
definitely. But maybe we should distinguish those, because the cost of the platform has the dashboard, whatever it is, has been increasing actually. If you look at the surveys that it provides, but and the API has gone down, so it's probably different market.
Yeah, that's why I had two price indexes. So one is the output of the upstream sector, and I then equated that to the price that businesses pay. I mean, I didn't make a distinction between the output price and the input price, because usually they're very close. But when it comes to consumers, their input price is different, because it's marketed differently and it's sold differently. I mean, they don't, you alone just sitting at your desk don't really have the wherewithal to pay by token unless you engage a third party with their own application that enables you to do it. I mean, so there's really two different prices. But they're all coming from the foundation models are driving them,
Eric is next.
So Carol, that really is a tour de force. I'm trying to take it all in and understand where it's going. I was a couple of questions that are probably related. One, on the user cost, there's the depreciation there, but really there should be a Q dot or a capital gains, but essentially the old model becomes worthless very rapidly, according to your statement that it's the frontier model that giveth. So last year's model, so the user cost must get really high with that, even though the quality is going up.
Yeah, I'm making the assumption that the rate of change, I'm really measuring user costs in some sense. I mean, I'm measuring services. I'm measuring a rate of change in prices that I am simultaneously applying as a user cost and as a asset price. But we don't really observe the asset. We only observe the services from it. So I say
We're in such an early age that I think a lot of people are putting money into this, into generating the next frontier, because they think that's going to be it all. So my next question related is do we think this will eventually lead to a situation where it's only the latest, greatest, best model that can have a market at all? Like, if I had a virtual brain surgeon, you'd only go to the best one if they could scale up infinitely. Or do we think that it's going to be energy costs that's the bottleneck, and it's the people that can provide the most related compute to energy? I didn't see the role of energy in all of this either.
Oh, energy is there because it's part of the R&D. The training of the new model those numbers are really big.
But the calls also use energy. So at the end, the cost of a call to an API is going to be the energy cost.
Well, that's in the token price, yeah.
Rents on the AI.
Yeah.
Rents on the AI get competed away, and the energy costs are
Yeah, I don't know how I should say I don't know how the energy feeds in, other than I know it's an element of cost in the R&D, and it's obviously factored into the cost of the use in the token price. But these token prices don't change all that much. They announced when the model is announced, and that's that. But that might change. And also, they're sort of global prices. And we know energy costs vary across countries, so I wondered about that myself, and I don't have the answer.
Do you think this will eventually go to a marginal cost-based pricing, or do you think we're going to have one or two firms that are the best ones that'll be a monopoly, winner take, first past the post monopoly?
I mean, if past is prologue, there's going to be some fallout. I mean, so yes, we'll see. But
I have Diane here, please.
Thank you, Carol, for a great talk. A lot of commentators think that there will be a net average return on all the investment that's going into AI infrastructure. And I wonder if that's the case, should it change how we think about interpreting the factor share figures that you think we should be looking at?
the commentators say there's a net what?
Negative return on the AI infrastructure investment.
The data centers.
Plus the trading.
Yeah, the trading. Not yet, I don't think. Again, I mean, if that is true, I mean, these companies are making money, okay. If that is true, it would be a shakeout, I think, and then the lowest cost, highest performance. I mean, there'll be some niches in the market, but the mainstream market is going to be dominated by, demand. I mean, who's I don't think price. I think it'll be demand because they're competing against each other. The prices are very close, but they're, Amazon raised money to cover its losses on its delivery system 10 years. And it wasn't until they started AWS that they then cross-subsidized AWS profits to subsidize the delivery system. I mean, it's barely like paying for itself now. So that's a long time. So I just think there'll be a shakeout, that's all, if that's true.
I don't see, David, sorry.
David Nguyen from Stanford. I actually work with Eric on this, and thank you for this fascinating agenda. We have released the survey you were referencing a couple of weeks ago. I should have sent it to you maybe before.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah. We're finding it's $125 per month at the moment per consumer, the consumer surplus from Gen AI, having access to it. And that's up from $97 just a year ago. And so that kind of increase compared to, how much money companies, the producers currently get from it, which is probably less than $10 billion from consumer-facing products, is really very much in line with the old Nordhaus kind of assumption that, in the early stages of technology revolutions, that, the overwhelming majority of the surplus cannot be appropriated by the producer but goes to the consumer. So it's definitely more than 95% at the moment. So I'll send you the paper, and thanks for referencing it.
Kevin?
Thanks. As one of the et als on the slide there, thank you for your endorsement of GDPB. I would say, you mentioned there are probably a lot of national accounts people here, and they're probably wriggling in their seats at the idea of consumer surplus being put into GDP. So I would just say that the total income approach to GDPB, which is in the original paper, that doesn't involve measuring consumer surplus. I also note the contribution of Paul Schreyer to look at the production side. of things, that if all this consumption is taking place, where is it being produced? And that was kind of a response to our GDP paper. So this is an important point when it comes to AI, because households are using AI a lot for home production. They're using it to produce memes and entertainment services for themselves and their networks. So if you think that, well, consumer surplus, no, this shouldn't be in GDP, well, you can think about the production that's going on by households using AI, and surveys have shown that people use AI more at home than they do in the workplace. So there's something going on there that's being unmeasured. There's also something going missing from GDP, in that these people are spending time doing that and they're not out buying market goods like movie tickets, etc. They've found another way of producing their own entertainment services using AI, and that's going to get bigger and bigger over the years, I believe.
We have Sanjeev, and then I think Jeremy, and then we'll close because we don't want to go over time too much. Maybe we can collect those two questions, and then you.
Okay.
Ilana, go ahead for Kevin. Yes.
Yes. GDPB is a bad name. I mean, the B just stands for benefits. And it's not, and by the way, even though sometimes it sounds this way when Eric talks, it's not like you want to add this to GDP. I mean, it's two different things. So just perish that thought if it was going through your mind. What I was trying to show was that that consumer surplus is a way of, it is a way of measuring welfare from the introduction of a new good. And the simple formula of -1/2 delta P, delta Q, where the delta P is negative, then you get a big number. And just exactly what your delta P is and exactly what your Q is hard to say when it's free goods. But that then gives you an anchor. The stated preference approach gives you an anchor to try to triangulate the kind of approach that Dave and I did, which was estimate a capital stock and compute a flow of services from it using our price indexes. And then that's where you get, and that's where we found this equivalence of approaches. So, part of this is me saying, so many people defend GDP by saying, oh, it's a production measure. Oh, of course it doesn't include consumer surplus. And it's like, no. First of all, within GDP, there is consumption. And if you have quality adjusted prices and they fall, you will get a positive consumer surplus in GDP or in consumption. It's there to the extent you have the proper price indexes. So that was the point I was trying to make.
Sanjeev and Jeremy, and then we'll conclude.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for that excellent presentation, Carol. I mean, obviously, it opens up lots of hooks and discussions and potential papers in the future. Contrary to Kevin's view, I'm a national accountant and I'm not wriggling in my seat on the thought of consumer surplus. But I think I just want to pick up on that last point first. There's a very different situation with an implicit consumer surplus, as you're indicating. If you've got quality adjusted prices, it's there, versus explicit adjustments of consumer surplus, which is why national accountants will say, go towards a satellite account or thematic account to make that fuller picture. And I think if you can delineate it like that, I can assure Kevin I'm not wriggling in my seat. Next thing is, I definitely agree with you. Some of the new items in the SNA, there's massive measurement challenges. But there's massive measurement challenges with what was already in the SNA with the world changing. so much with M&Es and cross-border flows and IP flows, etc. None of this is easy. There's also issues about licenses when people are paying for 1 year and they're paying every year and it doesn't get capitalized. It doesn't get capitalized into company accounts, it doesn't get capitalized in national accounts. It's intermediate, and that is a flaw unless we change the rules for an exception, and then that opens up all sorts of other territories. SNA's try to future-proof this, but this is ever-changing. So we know we're going to be revisiting various aspects. But I wanted to leave on one aspect, and that is, when you've got prices moving so rapidly, in current prices we've got a challenge, but you've got 14% quality adjustment, etc. What advice would you give to our price statisticians on the producer prices side more so than the consumer prices side? Okay.
Let me take the...
What was the question about producer versus consumer? I didn't quite hear that.
Oh, at the very end?
Yeah.
Yeah. If the consumer prices fall that fast, what do you tell the producer price on the producer prices? So in a supply use context. But maybe let's take Jérémy's question and then we can.
Thank you very much. I'm Jérémy Fouliard from the National Accounts Department at ESCoE France. You say that there is a measurement bias in price indices, and I was wondering, can you quantify the impact of this bias in the current GDP at constant prices? For instance, for economy like in the US, where the IT sector is huge. Thank you.
Let me take that question first. The answer is I don't know what the appropriate weight should be in the consumer price. I did try to estimate it, but remember I have been doing things globally, so that would take me to, well, let's do it for one country, and you just go down a rabbit hole of not really having the right numbers at one's fingertips. I mean, it could be a research project to get that, but I haven't. I'd love it, but next steps. So yeah, and Sanjay, the producer price and the consumer price can be different because of a margin that, and then it would show up in profits of the company. I think I also wasn't hearing all of what you were asking, but I think we can deal with that because they're just not the same, and we shouldn't pretend like they are, because also there is a different firm. There's another entity. It could still be Google, but there's another entity that says, I'm going to package something for you so that so you don't have to pick up these tokens yourself. And I'm going to make the front end really friendly because you're a law business and there's a certain things you want at your disposal. And that's where they then, they might also sell services to build up your vector databases. I mean, so there's these companies out there that are selling these services to help people use AI. So Harvey was one of the examples on that list, and that's used exclusively, to my knowledge, by lawyers, by law firms. And they're not going to just pass along the token prices. That's what they pay. That's their input. Then their customers' price is going to be more like the consumer price. It's different. I mean, I used sort of customer characteristics for usage in computing that price, and a law firm would just have a different profile, and it wouldn't come out to be the same. But the token price that they'd be paying would be the same as the token price that Google services would charge an enterprise that they were selling services to. So I don't think it's so complicated.
All right, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the session. So please join me and thank Carol again for a very interesting keynote.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for joining and asking.